Alright, I just got back from my government-sanctioned walk, feeling pretty good about life again. Depending on when this video releases, I am either incapable of being in public without a mask, or I am perfectly fine. To be honest, I can't write this intro one way or the other, because it's impossible to predict how life will be that far in the future. Whatever the case of the national health crisis, or lack thereof, welcome back to my ARC analysis series. Last time, I covered all the important filler content up till this point, and now we get into what could possibly be the best arc in this series so far. Will the trend of increasing quality continue? Let's find out. Leo gives the gang tickets to a beach resort in return for Lucy saving his life. They have a good, fun, stress-free day, and as Urza is relaxing in the evening, she has a flashback dream of some kind of slavery construction site. Only sound is that of the very effective music track, and it's chock full of visual detail the arc will soon explore. Some casino shenanigans ensue for a while. I actually had a lot of fun watching it, because it reminds me of why I like this show. The characters kind of act like real people here, with their own quirks and personalities on full display. Even if they're mostly trite and reused, the show does just enough with them to make these kinds of scenes enjoyable, and it's why I fell in love with the show when I first watched it. We also get an explanation of what happened to Phantom Lord from Juvia, who is here for some stalking-related reason. Phantom Lord has been totally disbanded, and she wants to join Fairy Tail for some totally not stalking-related reason. It doesn't last all that long, though, as they get attacked by Minecraft Astro Boy, Reverse Knight, Sinister Sister, and Girl Cat. They're old friends of Urza's, and they are taking her back by force, back to the Tower of Heaven. And Happy got kidnapped too, whatever. Lucy goes to where the others were attacked. Juvia gives this absurd line.
Are you jealous he was inside of me and not you?
She meant a protective water sphere that was invisible for some reason, but that doesn't matter. And they all run off to grab a boat to chase after Urza's old friends. Hey, you know what's great? A showing of personal grief and trauma being met with dismissal due to physical appearance.
I just want to have it on so that I feel safe.
But the outfit you have on now is lovely.
F you, show. I'm using his actual name for this because I hate this exchange, especially when he reverses it to be all about him. Look, he's a broken character for reasons we'll kind of get to later, and that's fine, but it needs to be made clear that this is not how you respond to stuff like this. Urza gets thrown in the prison cell and is hanged by her wrists, where Sho decides to have a creepy conversation without having closed the cell door about how she's gonna be used as the sacrifice for some guy named Jellal's ceremony. They both flash back to their pasts as slaves who were used by some black magic cult to construct something called the R system so they could resurrect their god, Zareth. There's a bunch of flashbacks like this to a setup plot that feeds into the main plot, but I'm gonna tackle the setup plot all at once when it'll be the most informative, and they would mess up the flow of the video otherwise. Back in the present, Sho goes crazy about how they're gonna get into heaven so much that he doesn't even notice when Urza breaks free and knocks him out. At this point, having heard about the existence of the Tower of Heaven and the R system, the Magic Council begins debate on the best course of action. The blue-haired guy I mentioned in the filler catch-up, Seagrain, the self-proclaimed twin brother to Jellal, proposes something that would be akin to actual war crimes committed by the United States and other nations, yet on a level even they wouldn't dare to meet. Cross-continental nuclear annihilation. An Etherion blast, able to wipe an entire country off the face of the planet. Despite how absolutely crazy this sounds, I mean, they wouldn't just murder their protagonists, would they? They begin to hold a vote on the matter, in cutaways throughout a portion of the arc. The rest of the gang arrive, along with Juvia, who actually comes up with a good plan for sneaking behind the enemy goons, but which becomes irrelevant because now that everyone's in their swimwear, we just have to point out Lucy's figure in a fight scene. And Jellal invites them in with the bridge to the main part of the tower. He's decided that this is all one big game to keep things interesting, despite seemingly knowing what's going on at the council for some reason. Next, after Virgo, I guess brought a huge feast for the gang off screen and forces Lucy to change out of her swimwear into a new outfit, which will no doubt get destroyed, in front of everyone, which creates one of those "the more you stare at this, the funnier it becomes" images. Urza shows up as Natsu runs off to find Happy, and she demands everyone else leave because this isn't their problem, it's hers. This moment actually kind of encapsulates how much better the anime can be from the manga at times, utilizing something close to cross-cutting to lay out Urza's emotional turmoil as she tells the people she loves most to go away to protect them, while the writing maintains the all-too-familiar "we're your friends, we're gonna help you because that's what friends do" inanities that make trying to pick any sort of greater meaning out of most scenes that include it a hassle to watch through. There's also another bullshit inanity that needs mentioning here, and it's this line.
Win or lose this battle, I'm staring death in the face.
I can't properly go into why I hate this line until later for reasons, but keep it in mind. There is a decision she's made for herself in her head that we aren't really going to see for a while proper, and all her dialogue here makes that abundantly clear. Before I get into the antagonist's plan, yeah, it's actually laid out pretty early, which is only for the better, I want to talk about something I failed to mention or even realize about the way the arcs in the show work. For the most part, each arc has a kind of focus character that gets the majority of the narrative importance, screen time, and character development. They may not become that arc's protagonist, since, spoilers, it's always Lucy and or Natsu for some reason, but their story, if done well, directly intertwines with the story of the antagonist. Galuna Island was the best example of that so far, until this arc, which you'll see why I say that later on, with Gray as the focus and Leon as his foil in a sense. They both came from the same master and had the same training, but it was their conflicting ideologies along with an inferiority complex on the part of Leon that caused them to fight. Not because one wanted to do a bad and the other said no. That being said, here we go. So, to understand Jellal's motivations, we have to jump back to the setup plot that took place 10 years prior to this arc's time. He, Urza, and all the friends who took her back in the present used to be slaves to an unknown black magic cult trying to build the R system, like I mentioned. At one point, they hatch a plan to escape, which failed, causing Urza to be taken in for, shall we say, enhanced interrogation. A revolt is staged, because they can't stop us all, and Jellal is suddenly taken in to replace Urza instead of maybe keeping both of them there because oops, there's a mutiny, and both have clearly demonstrated that they will kill the cultists if everyone's freedom is on the line. Jellal has what I think are hallucinations of a purple goop falling down and taking on the form of something that calls itself Zeref, the god the cult wished to bring back to life. Then there's some pretty amazing intercutting between an old guy who was friends with Macabre back in the day, dying to protect Urza while talking about how magic is a wonderful thing that brings people together, with the goop that calls itself Zeref shoving its dark influence in Jellal's goddamn eye, with the old man saying freedom is in your heart, directly followed by Zeref claiming there is no freedom in this world, and both contradicting each other with how dreams can be made into reality, and finally, one life ends while another is changed forever. This is when Urza realizes her magic power and uses it to bust everyone out and free Jellal, but the Zeref goop corrupted his mind to make him want to stay on the island and build the R system himself. He claims he's going to resurrect Zeref, which only calls into question what the f*** that purple goop was and what it did to him that all of a sudden gave him access to dark powers, and forced Urza, and only Urza, to leave while spending years convincing their friends that she actually betrayed them by leaving without them. And funnily enough, he still has a better workers' rights mindset than any US corporation I have ever seen.
I'm sure Zeref would prefer I build more hatred by ruling with an iron fist, but weak and unhappy people don't make very good workers.
Then again, he also mentioned that he doesn't need a sacrifice to Zeref to resurrect him, which honestly kind of baffles me. Are we really going to go back to lullaby levels of outright contradiction now? If so, not for long. So now we know his plan. Build the Tower of Heaven to serve as the body of the R system to resurrect the god Zeref. I have no problems with this plan whatsoever. The setup was done well enough that I'm actually pretty intrigued as to how this will play out for him and how he'll go about facing his opposition. So far, I'm interested. Back in the present, Sho comes in and yells at Urza all the lies Jellal fed him, claiming she betrayed them all because she was drunk with power. And Grace shuts him down in the absolute dumbest and simplest way possible.
Did you ever think he might be lying?
Yeah, just think about it, idiot. Reverse Knight apparates in, his name is Simon, by the way, that will be important later, and backs up Urza's claims because I guess he knew all along that Jellal was lying to them? How did he know that? The show's heavily implied in the flashbacks that Simon actually had a huge crush on Urza and kind of still does, tempered with age to be an admiration more than anything else, which I guess drove him to believe her over anyone else for some reason? I understand this being the mindset of, say, a 10-year-old child, but the dude's old enough to be 7 feet tall and absolutely built. So why is he immune to Jellal's propaganda while no one else is? Well, okay, if you take each person's personalities into account, this becomes obvious because they're all extremely susceptible to one thing in specific, be it cats, or Western films, or Urza, or goddamn everything. But that doesn't matter to the overall plot, and it's just a neat little aside I noticed in my second watch through of the arc. Anyway, show starts crying, and I'm honestly stunned by how much my own throat hurts from listening to Greg Ayres' performance here. It's so raw and primal, it makes me think back to when I messed up my own voice for a couple hours when I filmed this little bit in the Gluna Island video. It took me several tries to get it right, and even then I used the take that I did because after that my voice was completely shot. Natsu finally found the room that Happy was trapped in, but he ran off earlier with the cat robot, so no dice. There's a meaningless fight scene with Natsu's head stuck in a cat helmet, and by the way, when I said that Jellal is treating this whole thing like a game, I mean it. He brought out a full game board and everything. I should probably take this moment to commemorate the composers who wrote this little evil guy theme for Jellal. It's genuinely good stuff, as well as his voice actor, Robert McCollum. He has a really great dulcet tone style of voice when speaking in low volumes. It's almost like he took everything I found objectionable, even though that's not the right word for it, with Gray's voice actor Newton Pittman's style of deliveries in my Lullaby video and turned them into his strengths, though I bear no ill will towards Pittman. Oh, just before Jellal introduces 3 new people the gang will have to fight through, take a look at this spicy shot.
It is our turn, after all.
This was a professional anime production, yet A1 couldn't even spare a single in-between frame on the grip motion. Also, where did he get all these custom-made board pieces? This doesn't mean anything to the plot, but as a piece of world building, it's utterly confusing in a way that makes me genuinely curious how daily life at the tower was like. Oh right, those people I mentioned earlier. They show up and give introductions to us, the audience, and not Jellal, much in the same way one would introduce the Power Rangers. And Jellal announces the game over a wall-eye-based PA system. These assassins will do battle against the 8 members that make up this arc's gang in a simple 3-on-8 fight. However, remember the Magic Council and their debates? Well, the vote failed 4-5. But Seagrain finally mentions the whole Zeref thing, which causes a second vote to fire Etherion at the tower. So if the gang takes too long, it could be game over for everyone. I mentioned back in the Phantom Lord video how this show sets up fairly good premises at times, and this is a prime example of that sentiment. As for the writing and characterization problems, don't hold your breath. Seriously, don't. It's gonna be a while before we get into those. Throughout this exposition, Sho gets progressively more and more stressed out, and by the end it's enough to make him capture Urza in a card and run off with her in his pocket to try and fight Jellal himself. I know you're expecting me to harp on this since it's incredibly stupid, but he's had a rough day and an even rougher decade, and it's been made clear that he's not the most mentally or emotionally stable of the group, so I'm ignoring it and moving on. It's just to serve as setup to get all the characters in position to fight anyway. Natsu catches back up to Happy, and they decide to try to cheat at Jellal's little game, only to be ambushed by one of the assassins into this room full of... What the hell is going on here? Why is a room like this needed in the tower? What purpose does it serve? What? Ignoring that small brain hemorrhage, Simon shows up somehow and convinces Natsu he's on his side in the easiest way ever.
We don't believe you!
Hold on. Is that really the truth?
Yes.
So who is this Jellal guy anyway?
Natsu, are you f***ing kidding me? Are you f***ing kidding me? Whatever, give your big dramatic speech about what the nature of a guild should be.
Magic guilds are supposed to bring like-minded people together so they can share their dreams. They're not places for killers like you to team up. I hate it that there are people out there who will pay someone to commit murder. I hate it that there are people who will kill for money. And I hate that you're talking like you're in a real guild. Hear me, Birthright, let's dance!
God, I love Todd Habercorn's VA talents. And now let Mr. Owl spin you around for a while. Speaking of whom, during his introduction proper, Simon drones on about how these assassins are known as this, from this guild, they do this, and they killed the entire army of... And it really makes it seem like Mr. Owl poses a legitimate threat to everyone. But then again, you know that's not the case because this is fairy tale. And hey, Natsu's finally done spinning and... What the... Oh, and now Gray's here too! What? And he's already won! Okay, this fight is definitely a little... Well, actually a lot absurd, even for this show, but I actually kind of like little bits of it. Go watch it yourself, episode 36 and 37. It's pretty fun at times. Just know that it's being intercut with this other fight that I'll go into right now. Lucy and Juvia are met with a member of the band Kiss, who is the second assassin. Juvia locks him in a water sphere, and he decides to allow his hair to absorb all the water because, as he puts it, shampooing your hair every day without using conditioner dries it all out. Well, that's just true, but how does that translate into this? Juvia acts understandably shocked by this, but she can just do it again and again until his hair can't absorb water anymore. There's a limit to this. Kiss decides to enslave Juvia's mind and turn her into his own little rocker entourage, and her first move is to float over to Lucy and...
You gotta start by showing a little more skin.
No, Juvia, please don't do this.
Get ready to see this board in most of my videos now.
Well, after that mess, they fight for a bit, and Juvia projects her thoughts into Lucy's mind. Lucy tells her she's a friend, which does nothing, so she forces her hand into Juvia's water body. Again, it makes more sense in context, and uses that to summon Aquarius, who nukes the area with water, turns Juvia back to normal, and leaves Kiss open to an enormous blast known as a... Unison Raid. This is basically them both combining their magics with each other and using that as an amplifier to unleash even more power than either one could produce alone. And it's described by Jellal as being something monks can train for their whole lives and never even do once. Which only calls into question how on earth two newly acquainted people with completely unrelated magic power sets could manage to pull it out of their asses. Anyway, Kiss is left bald now because of too much water, which you'd think would be kind of obvious. Look, I went over both of these fights super quickly because they mean nothing to this arc's central theme, unlike the fight with the last assassin. We get some cutaways to the Magic Council, who have ended their second round of voting at 8-4 and 1 against, meaning that preparations have begun to fire Etherion. The only question now is when the blast will strike. Sho runs into this room that, again, has no purpose in the tower aside from being a neat backdrop for a fight, into the final assassin, who instantly severs his nerves without cutting his clothing or flesh.
What the hell even is this power set?
The card Urza is trapped in breaks her free from captivity, and we get an extremely linear fight scene that I'm honestly not interested in, but there's a lot here to talk about in terms of the arc's central theme. First, Urza cycles through as many armor sets as she can because they all keep getting destroyed instantly, and after enough of them have been broken, she chooses to don a holy cloth attire with no defense to speak of. Then, some speeches. So, Urza's whole character arc here is dealing with trauma. How to come to terms with horrible events that happen to you, move past them, and keep going while bearing all of the scars it left you with. As a kid first coming to Fairy Tail, her original method was to put up a false persona around other people and spending a lot of time alone crying. Which, thanks to a child Gray that we see in some flashbacks during his fight with Mr. Owl, is shattered. Because every time she's alone, she cries, and he's not gonna let her cry about whatever it is she's crying about ever again. Over time, though, she translated that to a more symbolic sense, shielding herself in armor at almost all times, and only really being able to open up to people fully when she's not wearing armor, which she only does when she's around an incredibly select group of people. While being far less literal, it's no less destructive, with her claiming that it kept her heart locked away inside a suit of armor to keep it from breaking again. Okay, it's worded in a cheesy way, but this show is meant for kids in their early teenage years, so it gets a full pass from me. A good way this was demonstrated, though, was when she asked Sho to let her put on her armor when they were on the boat to the tower because she doesn't feel safe going back there without it. Maybe this is just my own experience with this kind of stuff, but I can fully sympathize with her, and I completely understand why she would choose that way of dealing with her trauma as a slave. I did similar things both times I dealt with serious depression. I used to wear zip-up hoodies almost all the time because I needed that sense of physical contact, like someone was hugging me, but couldn't bring myself to be open to other human beings for fear that I might get betrayed again. Well, actually, that was during the first round with depression. The second time, I just kept myself occupied with 3 hours of trumpet playing a day, and then later making my fairy tale abridged video. I also have ADHD and autism, so that probably didn't help anything. But now, in this fight, she's choosing to throw all of that aside, because she realized she doesn't need her armor to stay safe and happy. Her friends have taught her that throughout the course of the series. This is pretty well done. There's a couple subtle hints that she doesn't fully open up to people as long as she wears armor, and is a lot more sociable and open when she's wearing regular clothes, or nothing at all in some cases. And from here on out, until the arc is over, she won't wear armor to fight her enemies. And in a single strike, her point is proven, and the assassin falls. Now, the only one left to defeat is Jellal himself. Everyone except Urza, Natsu, Simon, and Jellal have gotten on a boat and are getting as far away from the island as possible, because I guess Jellal told the sword lady who told Urza that in like 10 minutes Aetherion will strike. And we get this strange line coming from Happy.
He said once Natsu's true power awakens within him, he's gonna be unstoppable. Not even Jellal will be able to beat him.
So, remember when Urza told Natsu in the last arc to find his strength, the one that lies deep within him, right? This may or may not be similar to that, I have no idea. Simon also yells at Natsu because he refuses to involve himself in Urza's fight with Jellal. In his mind, since it's her fight, she won't forgive him if he steps in. Simon tries to put things into perspective with the fact that while he doesn't doubt Urza's magic, Jellal is cunning enough to manipulate her emotional state in whatever way he wants to gain an advantage. Knowledge she sorely lacks as she confronts him face to face at last. Unfortunately, Simon also guesses that her main goal in all of this is to save him, and he believes that, should the worst happen, her plan is just to buy time for everyone else to escape while she, Jellal, and the tower get obliterated by Aetherion. Which I find incredibly frustrating for reasons we'll cover at the end of this video. Hearing this, however, Natsu finally decides to charge into action and find her. During the fight between Urza and Jellal, it's clear from the beginning that everything he says and does is shady. He seems to relish in the fact that they will all soon die to Aetherion. He pulls the "I never put a gun to their head and force them to work" argument I've heard so often from corporations that deserve to wither away and die. And he hardly flinches when Urza has him pinned to the ground, sword in his throat, claiming that the R system is missing a part so vital that resurrection is impossible without it. Energy. He simply doesn't have enough power to activate it and perform a full resurrection, and given how much power it requires according to the series, he never will. And he even brushes aside Urza's remark of, "Do you want to die?" with, "Hey, that doesn't sound so bad to me." So, okay, in this moment, he claims that he's just been a puppet that Zeref has been manipulating since that day in the enhanced interrogation chamber, used to become a fully living flesh and blood again. Jellal laments that if only he was able to save himself from Zeref's influence then, maybe things would be different now. Maybe they wouldn't be seconds away from having a flash of heavenly destruction rain down on their heads. And speaking of which, it is now that the council members pray for forgiveness as they begin to release Aetherion. Urza and Jellal hold one final embrace, with her asking for forgiveness for not saving him back then, and him replying that she already has saved him. And they prepare themselves for the end. Dramatic music blasts in a powerful fashion. The Aetherion is released to the satellite square, and fires. This is it. Only oblivion. Oh wait, what? The dust settles, the sky clears. Now we lay eyes on the remains of the tower. Crystals? Wait, those couldn't be. Are they lacrimas? But that means... Wait, they're still alive? Oh god, Jellal, what have you done? Is that classical music? Oh, is that Rachmaninoff I hear? Let me guess. Movement 1, Piano Concerto number 2 in C minor. Something's wrong here. This is a tragic epic piece. Jellal stands up, laughs maniacally, and confirms my suspicions. What we are staring at is the true form of the Tower of Heaven. A lacrima crystal big enough to contain the entire continent genociding power of the Etherion Blast. Now he has everything he needs to complete his decade-long plan. I need to make mention that this is absolutely how you write a twist in your fiction. Spend enough time hinting that something isn't going to go well so that when the twist happens, it doesn't come out of nowhere. And the Rachmaninoff only serves to elevate this scene beyond comprehension as someone who likes classical music. Hell, I use moments from Danse Macabre in my arc analysis videos, and both it and Marche Diabolique in my updated but still kind of bad Tournament of Power video, both of which I performed in high school and college respectively. Fun fact, snippets of the same Rachmaninoff concerto were used when Urza relayed her past in the tower to the rest of the game, which really helps to tie the whole thing together in a beautiful package. This moment keeps getting better, by the way. As the music builds further, and the only council member who voted not to fire, Yajima, moves to question Seagrain, he vanishes, as if he was never there to begin with, and we find him now at the tower with Urza and Jellal. They all make some interesting banter before Seagrain and Jellal pull some even crazier twists. Not only have they been in cahoots with each other this whole time, but the two of them are actually the same person. Seagrain was simply a physical projection put forth by Jellal to sabotage the Magic Council and guarantee a blast from Etherion. This is also incredibly amazing, because it too has been foreshadowed throughout the arc, so much so that every single cutaway from the council to the tower up until Urza's confrontation with him has included some clever visual that implies some sort of connection between Seagrain and Jellal beyond them just being twins. I encourage anyone with even a slight interest to watch this arc after watching this video, and also definitely subscribing to see more, to spot all the little things it does right. It's very good right now. In fact, so far, this arc has been my favorite in the series. And I have to commend Robert McCollum's performance as both Seagrain and Jellal, simply because there's a very subtle difference in their speaking tones. It's possible to easily distinguish which voice is Seagrain and which one is Jellal, and that's damn fine voice work. There's actually a moment near the beginning of the arc where you can hear Jellal make a mistake and speak in his own voice when posing as Seagrain with this line.
The Tower of Heaven. It's not the R system. It's the Tower of Heaven, to be clear.
Holy shit, that just makes it even more amazing! I can't get over this! At this point, another one of the council members, Ultir, the woman who spoke with Seagrain in the epilogue of the Gloona Island arc, uses her Arc of Time magic to destroy the council building, as she's been Jellal's cohort through this entire plan. We cut back to some genuinely decent fight animation, this particular cut is my favorite of the fight, until Urza gets paralyzed because of something Jellal implanted on her body during the embrace. Jellal pushes her into a jello mold that's somehow still a crystal, and the ceremony begins, at least until Natsu pulls her out of the jello. Urza begs him not to fight Jellal, he'll die trying, but Natsu knocks her out for a bit, and gives this strange line in a speech.
She looks so weak and fragile. Her voice was trembling with fear. I don't want to see Urza like that. I've always looked up to her as a strong warrior, and when she wakes up from this nightmare, I want her to feel like her old self again.
Hey, Natsu, I know you weren't there for this, but she said that she doesn't want to lie to everyone anymore, and even then, she's allowed to show weakness and emotions, you prick. Listen, I know he means well, but unfortunately, this is where the problems I mentioned before start, though not at first. After giving Natsu a chance to look cool in action, Jellal shows him that he is utterly outclassed by using extreme speed to gain +2 move priority. His heavenly body magic is actually a decently neat concept, utilizing the power of real-world celestial bodies, or at least having them as an attack theme, such as Meteor, which grants him that insane speed, and his next attack, Grand Chariot, which I guess is supposed to be based on a 7-star constellation that totally isn't one line away from being the Big Dipper, leaving Natsu battered on the floor. Jellal remarks that he shouldn't allow too much more damage to the tower, else his plans cease to work. causing Natsu to change priorities to breaking as much of the tower as he can. After doing that for a bit, Jellal gets pissed off enough to begin charging up an enormous blast, Alteria, which will kill Natsu upon contact. Urza decides to be stupid and stand in front of Natsu, oh yeah, she woke up by the way, which only prompts Jellal to decide to just kill both of them with the blast, which you'd think would be obvious considering it's powerful enough to cause her shadow to bend towards it so it's literally functioning as a black hole, because he can easily find a suitable replacement for his sacrifice to Zeref. The blast finishes charging, Jellal hurls it towards both Urza and Natsu, and now is when the problems begin. Because the blast doesn't hit either of them. It instead hits Simon, who jumped in the way of the blast to die instead of Urza or Natsu.
Why aren't all three of them dead? Is it just no longer a black hole? Is Simon literally so thick that his mass cancels out the infinite gravitational pull of a black hole? Why did no one dodge out of the way? It moves slowly and in a straight line, so it's perfectly possible to just move yourself or someone else a few feet to the side and let the blast continue off into oblivion. No one has to die here! I hate this trope!
The only conceivable way this could be here is because Simon is just worth enough to try to force the audience to feel sad that he's dead now, but just worthless enough that I don't give a damn? He wasn't built up to be a real character like anyone in the gang. He's only served as an exposition machine thus far. Why should we care about him dying? And also, it's only really here because of the visual symbolism that him dying to protect Urza, whom he loves in a romantic way, is exactly like that one old man dying to protect Urza, whom he loves in a grandfatherly way. And because it gets Urza to start crying enough to make Natsu so angry that he decides to eat the Lacrima Crystal to try to get a power boost, which it turns out is toxic for him for some reason. Okay, so because he's a fire dragon slayer, consuming any elemental magic that isn't fire is toxic and will presumably kill him, and Aetherion is made up of all kinds of elemental magics. As much as I genuinely like the stipulation to his power set, this wasn't foreshadowed, implied, or even outright stated by anybody. It just comes out of nowhere to add more dramatic tension and irony, but then Natsu decides to just suck it up and to not die from the thing that is literally deadly to someone with his power set, and fully attains the power boost he was looking for. The legendary form only Dragon Slayers can reach, which taps into the full might of a dragon. Dragon Force. In case it wasn't obvious, the way he attains this is incredibly stupid, and I'm not even sure if it was fully foreshadowed. Both Urza and Simon did mention something about how, once he finds his strength, no one can stop him, but is this even the same thing as Dragon Force? It doesn't even get an official name here. That doesn't happen for another 2 or 3 arcs. I'm telling it to you now to make things perfectly clear. It could be that they both mean that his power comes from emotions, which is just true. The stronger the emotions he feels, the stronger his drive to beat up whoever his enemy is at the present moment, and the greater his magical and physical output. But did they mean that? Or did they mean Dragon Force? My job here is literally to interpret and relay all of this shit, and I can't even do that properly, because there are basically no arcs that connect to each other in a meaningful and sensical way, so I don't know what to say now. Okay, so it turns out Dragon Force is the power within Urza spoke about. I have no idea if it was the same power that Simon spoke about, but either way, this brings up a lot of questions like, how did she know about Dragon Force when Natsu, a Dragon Slayer, has no idea what it is, given the fact that dragon slaying is considered a lost magic eking to the Arc of Time, but for more spectacular reasons we'll cover in a million years, so why Urza knows about a lost form of a lost magic is completely beyond me, but this has been the longest sentence I've ever written in my entire life. I have no idea what's happening anymore. Natsu schools Jellal for a bit with his new power, and Jellal next pulls out Abyss Break! You know, the spell charged by the 4 main elements, water, earth, fire, and air, none of which he has access to? I know why it's here, to show some form of power progression. Jellal is so far above the previous antagonist, minus Jose, that he can throw around magic that 4 separate people were needed to passively charge over a long span of time with complete ease and instantly. But the logistics of it all make no goddamn sense. Except that due to a single slice from Urza in their initial confrontation, his focus breaks, and Natsu charges up to break him in a brutal, explosive finale while shouting at him to free himself. I'll touch on that last sentiment later, but right now Jellal's plan is no more. Natsu's dragon force fades, and he is victorious. Oh, but the arc isn't over yet because the tower is going to explode! Why? So, the show's explanation is that too much magic power contained in one place will cause an explosion, and also that the magic from Aetherion will continue to build until it becomes unstable, which are completely unrelated to each other and also not how energy works. And if too much power in one place will cause an explosion, why was Aetherion perfectly fine and not exploding when it was condensed into a single ball the size of a house during transport, and not fine when absorbed by a tower the size of a skyscraper? I can't even pull the whole right, fairytale, got it joke I used in the first two videos, because this is utterly inexcusable. Ursa grabs Natsu to try to get them both out of the tower, and watches Simon's limp corpse hilariously fall into the nothingness of the endless void before realizing what is, in her mind, an amazing plan. She goes back to the Jello mold and begins to shove her body into it because she wants to control the magic energy from Aetherion. You know, the stuff that will literally destroy her body to merge with it so that she can force the tower to not explode. Oh, I hate this ending. I don't know, maybe in her fatigue-ridden state, her body shut off the logical portion of her brain to allow for a stronger fight-or-flight response. That's the best guess I have. Ursa gives a tearful goodbye to Natsu, giving up her life to protect the people she loves, which has been her plan this whole arc, I'll get to that, and succumbs to the Jello. The explosion then takes on the form of a giant laser that shoots up into the sky, keeping everyone safe. We then cut to a flashback of Ursa getting a healing treatment to fix her broken eye. Remember that eye patch in the other flashbacks? And special attention is paid to the fact that her right eye, which isn't real but somehow still lets her see, can't cry like her real eye can. We fade back to the present, where Ursa's in a random white dress that she has never been in the whole series, so what the hell happened to the Jello? And we're shown Ursa's funeral, with Ursa's spirit floating above everybody else, but actually that's present Ursa, and this is just a vision the tower is showing her, maybe? I'm fucking lost here. Ursa laments that, oops, it's actually her being alive that all her friends like, almost like killing yourself is the worst way to solve any problem, and suicide is not worth it, life is. And she wakes up on a beach next to the casino from the beginning, with Natsu holding her in his arms, with the rest of the gang running up to them both. How did they get back to the resort? How did Natsu get her back to the resort while still holding her in his arms? How did Natsu get her back to the resort while still holding her in his arms while still being separated from everyone on the boat? Natsu tells Ursa, promise me you won't do something crazy like that again, which I'm like 80% sure she does several more times throughout this series, but I can't exactly remember right now. That's what this series is for. Remember this line from way earlier I mentioned?
Win or lose this battle, I'm staring death in the face.
I think it's obvious why I hate this line, but let me make it perfectly clear. This series likes to put its characters into opportunities where they would need to make the decision to make a noble sacrifice in order to save their friends. And basically, no, I think every time, it results in no actual meaningful changes. Characters will give their tearful goodbye speeches about how others need to cherish their lives or whatever, the death seemingly happens, but something always comes in to reverse that sacrifice. Every single time. So far, we've had 3. 2 of them being from Grey and Galuna Island with the iced shell, and 1 from Ursa this entire arc. And that number is only going to grow exponentially. Okay, calm down, VK, calm down. As the arc wraps up, we get a nice little epilogue narration from Lucy.
Once we were able to relax a little back at the resort, Ursa opened up to me about everything. She said she had a feeling that Jellal might have been the one who kept the tower from exploding.
What the f***? Jellal kept the tower from- Oh, no, okay, nope, I'm angry again. So you're telling me that the main antagonist of the arc shoved himself into the Jellal mold to merge his body with the Etherion? The thing he was going to make Urza do to kill her and resurrect Zeref somehow didn't die from that, changed the trajectory of the explosion, and pulled himself out of the Jello? What? So even then, Urza failed at the one thing she thought she could do to keep her friends safe.
I was skeptical, but I suppose he could have gone back to his old self once he was free from Zeref's possession.
Oh, wait, was it ever made clear that Jellal was possessed? I know he said he was possessed, but wasn't that just a ploy to gain Urza's trust enough to make her not want to kill him? Because it was established earlier that he knew exactly how to manipulate her however he wanted to gain any advantage he wanted. It was never truly said what caused him to be evil by anyone at any time. I know what it really is, and trust me, it's way more complicated, but in this arc alone, it was never fully explained, or even implied. The characters just kind of assume without knowing. Later, Urza catches Sho, Wally, and Miliana, yeah, those are their real names, hopping on a boat to go on their own adventures now that they're finally free. I didn't mention a second ago that Urza offered them spots in the Fairy Tale Guild because I was too busy being angry at everything, but the reasoning is that this is the only way to see the world and fully explore their first time being truly free. Completely ignoring the fact that being in a guild is a perfectly reasonable way of doing this, but whatever. Urza serenades them like they were already members of the guild, and they sail off so they can avoid breaking up the social dynamics of the current gang. We'll see them, eventually. Maybe. Some of them. Okay, epilogue, rapid fire, let's go. The gang get back to the guild hall to find it fully completed off screen, they explore it a bit, and someone made a Lucy action figure without her knowledge or consent, which violates all sorts of licensing laws. And they aren't paying her royalties for any of the sales, which violates even more. Juvia's been made into a member of the Fairy Tale Guild, which I saw coming and I'm fully into it. I like Juvia when she's at her best, she feels genuinely intimidating and smart. Also, Gajiel's there. He's a member too, because he just needs to find work, and we get this line from Levy, the woman he assaulted.
Yeah, if I'm okay with him here, then you should be too.
Yeah, it's not like he kidnapped and tortured you or anything, Lucy. Get over it. Mira opens up some curtains and gives some kind of special performance, which I totally skipped, because at this point, that ending has left me so dejected that I can't bother with anything.
Sparkling and colorful, shooby-dooba, you caught my eye like a shiny piece of metal.
Whoa!
You know what? I can get down with this. Gajiel's spunky jazz tracks are honestly a lot of fun. And it's clear that actor David Wald is really enjoying himself in the booth. I'm totally down for this. Okay, yeah, I think I've calmed down enough to finish this arc. There's a bit of a post-credit scene with Jet and Droy, Levy's friends, beating up on Gajiel for completely understandable reasons, until Makarov's grandson and one of the S-Class members of the guild, Loxus, comes in and takes over, annihilating Gajiel instantly. Levy snaps back, telling him to lay off because Gajiel isn't fighting back. He's accepting all of their violence to try to gain some semblance of respect from them. Loxus throws lightning at her, but Gajiel dashes in to block it. He then walks away, and as we get a glimpse of Loxus's towering might, the arc fades into the end. After covering, quite frankly, a lot of information, let's talk theming. The main theme of the arc was, like I said, how to deal with past trauma, but there was one other theme that was mentioned constantly, that of inescapable fate. So many times, Jellal makes mention that his resurrecting Zeref is simply tied to fate. It's his destiny. There really isn't any exploration of this theme, so the one thing I could argue is that in and of itself creates a conflict of one person wants to follow their perceived destiny while the others rebel against it. But that's a pretty weak argument if you ask me. In terms of lasting effect on this series, I mean, we now know some neat stuff about Zeref. Thing is though, we kinda don't. Like, the stuff I mentioned in my filler catch-up video is more than the series gives you at this point, but it's kind of necessary for you to know this stuff because, like I said in that video, when he becomes more relevant to the plot, you need to be aware of what the hell he is. There's also some interesting character stuff that will matter later, and I'll cover that when I need to, but otherwise, not a ton of useful information here. Now, to end this analysis, the ranking. This time, it's a little bit tough, since the arc was so near perfect up until the ending moments, but here's what I can say. As a whole, the arc earns a very solid 8 out of 10, but had it ended in a cohesive and satisfying way, it would have earned an easy 10 out of 10, no question. This has been my favorite arc so far. I thoroughly enjoyed watching it and writing this video, so I really hope the next arc doesn't screw this up entirely. I'm Van Campone, and I will see you guys next time.